Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of Newsreel Now. I'm your host, Jack Brewster. I'm the CEO and founder of Newsreel. Newsreel Now is a Sunday show that grew up on the internet. Every week, we bring to you some of the biggest stories of the last week. We bring some experts and guests in to talk about them. And our show is always and will always be radically youth focused. I have a new co host here today, Kitty. Kitty, I met several months ago. She has about the most British name I have ever heard. But Kitty, over to you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Kitty Shepherd Cross, and I'm a production assistant in Newsreel now.
Looks like Kitty. Did we lose Kitty, Riley?
And
Okay, all right. I'll take over for a little bit just to introduce the show. We have some really important stories this week. The first one is going to be about the World Cup and some of the ICE protests. We're also going to talk about UK's social media ban. We're also going to talk about youth's unemployment this summer. And then we'll finish it up by talking about a trending TikTok video that has angered some people over the last week. Kitty, I think you're back with us. Over to you for our first segment.
yeah, so our first story is on my home turf in the United Kingdom, and it relates to a decision on the 15th of June. Our Prime Minister announced plans for sweeping new restrictions on child social media use. And this includes a complete ban of social media sites such as TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook for under 16s. And the government says it plans to bring this legislation to Parliament before Christmas 2026 and hopes the protections will be in place by spring 2027. And it has faced some backlash. For example, a parliamentary petition named Do Not Ban Social Media for Under 16s now has 200,000 signatures, and this means it has to be considered for parliamentary debate. But others are rejoicing, parents especially, and the announcement followed a poll on 120,000 people, and it showed 90% of parents backed the social media ban. And we have one of those parents here today, a particularly important campaigner, an MBE, Ellen Room. She is also a mother of Jules Sweeney, who died at their home in Cheltenham in 2022, aged 14, in circumstances that she believes may have involved the TikTok blackout challenge. But due to privacy restrictions, Ellen was unable to access key information from his social media accounts. So, following his death, Ellen left her career in financial services to find answers and campaign for better protections online. In 2026, her campaigning was successful, and she secured Jules Law as an amendment to the Crime and Policing Bill. And the new legislation requires social media companies to preserve a child's data within 5 days of their death. But most recently, she successfully campaigned for the latest under 16 social media ban. And her campaigning doesn't stop there, because she's currently one of 5 British families bringing legal action against TikTok in the US, pushing for a case claiming that self-harm content contributed to their children's premature deaths. So welcome here today, Ellen.
Hi, thank you.
Now I've watched lots of your videos online, and you've formed like an amazing campaign, and I'm probably most interested in, like, what do you see as the biggest risk on social media for children?
Well, I think social media, I mean, it's been proved all over the world, hasn't it, that social media is feeding harmful algorithmic data to our children. You've got strangers being contacted on platforms, and children their brains are not fully deformed yet. They're being thrown information from social media companies with no regulation. So the fact that the government here has stepped up and actually going to look at raising the age to 16 come spring, I think is fantastic news.
And I think people will probably ask, what happens when you turn 17? How do you ensure a safe transition into using social media, and rather than just delay the issues?
Well, I think we regulate everything, like for alcohol, cigarettes and things like that. We don't suddenly say, well, at 18, we're going to teach you to drink alcohol. You know, at 18, we think they're mature enough to learn to self-regulate in some way. So I think as children are older, they have more ability to do that. But there needs to be education in school, which the government are applying money into, to educate the children in school, so that they're learning, you know, how to use social media and things. The finer details hasn't come out. That's coming out in July next month. But it's really important we teach children about the harms of social media. They're also talking about bringing out curfews so that 16 to 18-year-olds, potentially the rumour is that at 8:30 in the evening, they won't be able to doom scroll all overnight. So there's lots that hasn't come out yet. The devil's going to be in the detail, but we need to see what's issued in July.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. And I think most people are kind of coming to terms with a lot of the bad aspects of social media, but there are some good aspects to it. For example, news consumption, which can be good and bad, but the recent Ofcom news consumption report, which focused on 12 to 15-year-olds, and it was published in May this year, it said that of the children that access news, social media routes they consume it. So how do you think this ban will impact that, and what measures can be introduced to reduce like the impact on news consumption?
Well, we're not banning the internet. There's other sites that are regulated by Ofcom in this country. So we're not saying actually get rid of everything and they have no access to any news channels. There's all sorts of things. So, you know, here we've got things like the Newsreel for children and things like that. So they can access proper sites that are regulated, as opposed to there is so much fake news, as we know, on social media. So actually, it's perhaps some of that is doing children damage. Whereas actually, if they look at some of the sites which are regulated and are working properly, they'd actually be better informed.
Yeah, no, definitely. And do you see a future where social media sites could change their regulations and it could be reintroduced for children in a safe way, or do you not see capacity for that?
Yes, but it needs to be the technology companies that change. So they could change if they wanted to. They could step up now and make a difference. They're choosing not to until we enforce them. So, you know, time and time again, they continue as they are, as opposed to actually saying, we'll put safety measures in place, we'll design our platforms so they're safety by design. And they haven't chosen to do that. So the government stepped in and said, you will do this, or we won't have our children accessing it, which I think is fundamentally fantastic.
Okay, thank you so much for bringing your expertise, and good luck with the rest of your campaigns.
Thanks very much.
So now I'm bringing it back to Jack, who's going to be
Sorry about that. Now we're turning from social media to soccer. So all over the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, the FIFA Men's World Cup has gotten underway. Tens of thousands of international visitors have arrived and are coming through the Department of Homeland Security, which has created some problems for some of the World Cup fans. ICE has now confirmed that it will be part of the World Cup security. And ICE's Homeland Security's investigative unit says enforcement will not be one of its priorities during the tournament. A Washington Post University Maryland poll out this month found that nearly 2/3 of Americans oppose ICE agents being present at World Cup stadiums. And on May Day, hospitality workers at SoFi Stadium, members of Unite Here Local 11, marched on FIFA's Los Angeles office. 96% of the union voted to authorize a strike during the Cup, and SoFi ultimately reached a deal that includes the right to strike if ICE threatens staff or fans. Joining us now is Chris Purdy from the national coalition No ICE in the Cup. Chris, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Would you mind just first just telling our audience and listeners a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, so this coalition is part of a broader effort in American society to bring together different pillars, faith leaders, veterans, business leaders, folks from across the spectrum to really push back against what we're seeing are abuses in this country. And there can be no more abuse in our minds of seeing immigration and customs enforcement agents, militarized agents providing security and roaming around when you are having this international event of joy and celebration. I think we've all seen over the past year the way that ICE and the Department of Homeland Security have treated American citizens. You can look at Minneapolis, for example, this past winter, when the agency descended on that city, murdering 2 American citizens and terrorizing countless others. We don't think that that is representative of who we are as Americans. And to see that agency as the face of security at this great international sporting event is quite offensive to us. And Americans are fundamentally an optimistic people, and so we're combating this with a series of events of joy and celebration to draw attention to the fact that we're all one body, we're all one people, and we want to have a safe and secure games without masked armed agents patrolling the streets.
So ICE had said that enforcement is not going to be the priority at the World Cup. Do you trust that distinction that they're going to be there but not actually enforcing anything?
Whether or not ICE is enforcing immigration is irrelevant. The Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents are masked, armed men that are wearing military uniforms, and their presence deters people from engaging in public life. This is a fact. Whenever the agents show up, whether it's at the airport or on the city street, people feel less safe. They feel less secure. So the fact that they're not taking people away for immigration matters doesn't mean that they're not a threat to the safety on the street.
So I just talked about the poll, how 2/3 of Americans are saying that they actually don't want ICE at these games. But is the pressure from Americans or your organization landing anywhere or getting any progress with FIFA and the White House?
So, ultimately, our audience is the American people and the international guests that are coming to these games. We want the broad audience to understand that Americans don't support this type of abuse in our cities. The White House is going to do what they're going to do. FIFA is, notoriously not receptive to public pressure one way or the other. So we want to make sure that those who come to the games feel the sense of joy and optimism that we as Americans know that we can offer, and not see and not be dissuaded by the fact that you have these armed agents on the street.
What would you do if you were the head of FIFA?
I would do a lot of things if I were the head of FIFA that probably would never get enacted. But the first thing I would do is end this contract. There are other ways to provide security in this country. There are a number of private security companies that one could contract with. Local governments have robust law enforcement. In my hometown of Atlanta, Georgia, we have a fantastic police force that is fully capable of providing external security on these games. So, I think if the idea is to highlight who we are as a country, and we're all over you have games all over the nation, what better way than to highlight the local police forces or state agencies in those states that can provide that security. If I were FIFA, I would not have nothing to do with an agency that has murdered 2 of its own citizens in the past year.
Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Kitty, over to you for.
Yeah, so yesterday, on Wednesday, the 24th of June, 2 massive earthquakes hit around 160 kilometers west of Venezuela's capital, Caracas, at around 6 p.m. local time, and then 20 or so aftershocks followed, and they were a magnitude 7.2 and 7.5, which makes them the country's most powerful earthquakes in 125 years. And so far, there have been 164 confirmed deaths, but the US Geological Survey has used modeling to estimate the deaths could be between 10,000 and 100,000. Of course, computer projections, and there is not a real body count, and we're not expected to know this true figure for a few days, if not weeks. And today we have Aracilla Joseph with us, who is the director of the she's the director of seismic research at the University of the West Indies. And yeah, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you must be very busy, so thank you for joining. Could you explain, like, geologically what happened when this earthquake hit yesterday?
So the earthquake occurred on the southern boundary of the Caribbean plate. It is the border that is between the Caribbean and the South American plate boundary, and it is a very active tectonic area that experiences a lot of activity due to the fault systems, the complex fault systems that underlie that area. So this type of earthquake, while it was the largest earthquake in a significant time in that area, as you mentioned before, it is not uncommon in that it is the type of activity that could be associated with that type of tectonic environment.
Yeah, and for people outside Venezuela, could you explain, like, quite how severe it is?
So I can only comment based on what I've seen in terms of the impacts in the media and what we're seeing. But as you mentioned, the death toll is already climbing. The housing structure in Venezuela and in the area that has been impacted is one where the buildings are multi-storied. And because of that, and perhaps the age of the infrastructure has contributed to the current impacts in terms of the buildings being pancaking on each other. I mean, the different stories are collapsing, and this is what has led to the challenge right now in terms of the increasing death toll and trying to get people out and the significant amount of damage that is being observed.
And so earlier I mentioned that prediction from the US Geological Survey that between 10,000 and 100,000 deaths could have occurred. What are your opinions on that, and how accurate do these tend to be?
I'm not really familiar with the way in which they modeled those figures, and it would be difficult to define, considering that I'm not sure how census, how current census surveys, etc., were in Venezuela, considering the massive migration in recent years based on their economic situation. But it will be a significant number. However, I believe that many of the persons would be in the unaccounted for or missing category for a long period of time. So this is unfortunate.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're going to move on to our next story. Thank you. So now I'm handing back over to Jack.
Thank you, Kitty. Yeah, no, that's a harrowing segment. This is a story that's been really just trending for a long time now, where youth employment is really, really struggling. So there's a new report out from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York that it's actually remote work, not AI, that is affecting young people when it comes to unemployment right now. But Just a few stats for our listeners to kind of give a outlook on the problem. So the unemployment rate for recent college graduates ages 22 to 27 was 5.6% in March. The general unemployment rate that month was 4.2. The rate for older degree holders was 3.1. The outplacement firm, Challenger Gray and Christmas, now projects the summer will be the lowest teen hiring total the federal government started tracking since the federal government started tracking it in 1948. And teen summer jobs fell 25% last summer, year over year. Joining us now is Alex Lundegren, Policy and Advocacy Manager at Young Invincibles, a national policy group focused on young Americans. Thank you so much for joining us, Alex.
Thank you for having us.
So the New York Fed says that remote work is the biggest driver here. Does that match with what you and your members are seeing?
No, I would say that is not really what we're analyzing as the driver or the problems with regards to what we're seeing with regards to recent college grad employment and youth employment in general. That's not really what our members are saying or what from our research is really the source.
What is the source?
That's a great question. So there's a couple things happening, right? So we're kind of in a normalizing labor market right now where we're coming out of the pandemic, and there was that huge labor boom of coming out of the pandemic. All these employers had labor shortages and they needed jobs filled. So we're kind of coming down from that. So the labor market's starting to normalize where that boom is kind of ending. And so people are staying in their jobs more. There's not that significant demand. And then two, especially from the young adult perspective, what we're seeing a lot of, especially from the graduate perspective, is this idea of an experience paradox where that entry level white collar job right out of college is one being replaced by AI, but also just because of the amount of people who are receiving their bachelor's degree now, employers can require more, job requirements. So that's why you see those entry level job posts that say 5 years of experience when it's like, well, I spent 4 years in school. Like, how was I supposed to be interning during that time instead of focusing on school? And now from the employer perspective, that's really the answer to that is yes. And so we're seeing a lot of people graduate who don't have that experience or that topical work experience that's kind of keeping them from getting that job. And then lastly, with regard to the point about summer employment, specifically among teens, what I think we're also seeing largely is with the kind of economic downturn we're in the present affordability crisis. Oftentimes the first thing to go are people's discretionary spending. So that's things like restaurants, retail, and with regards to summer employment, where a company might see a lot of more foot traffic over the summer due to people getting out and vacationing more and, going to restaurants. With everyone having trouble with their discretionary spending, we're likely to see those sectors suffer and thus not have new openings for new job openings for these youth that are exiting school or, out of high school for the summer and are looking for that job at their local ice cream shop or their local restaurant. And then even further to that point, there's competition among, adult workers who have to pick up a second job and need additional hours or need a second job just to make up for the lack of, or for the increasing affordability concerns.
So my first job was, I think I'm trying to remember now. I think was at a bakery cleaning the toilets, I believe, like mopping the toilets and then doing some like back kitchen work. I also was a camp counselor.
Yep.
I look back on these jobs very fondly, even as like annoying they were in the moment, and I think it definitely led a lot to my development just as a human being. What do you think in terms of like if there's a lot of young people that are missing out on these jobs, like what is that going to do to the average young person in terms of their career trajectory and maybe even the sort of the drive that they have to be productive members of our workforce?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And you're highlighting a really prevalent problem. And for the future of like our labor force in general, is a heavy emphasis on those soft skills. And what you just talked about with regards to working in a back kitchen or a lot of customer service roles, a lot of these jobs, they teach you early on, they build a lot of soft skills that employers are looking for later down the line. So things like communication, leadership, working with customers, sales, anything like that. If you're working in a restaurant as a server, that can, lead to a sales role. decreasing those amount of opportunities for young people is really kind of just delaying their development of those soft skills. And it's delaying their entry into the labor market in general. And so that presents a lot of concerns with regards to, their economic mobility, largely with regards to climbing the career ladder, longer lifelong earnings, a host of problems, develop from that.
What do you say to the argument, just backing up for a second, that employers are using AI as a scapegoat for their economic problem, their economic woes, and maybe overhiring during the pandemic? I mean, I have seen that just on Twitter or X bubbling up, that people are saying that, oh, that's actually just a cop out, that it's actually not AI, and really it's just that employers overhired during the pandemic, and now they're like, oh, I need to give a good reason for why I'm not hiring as much.
Yeah. And so I'll circle back earlier too. I think it's like a compounding effect, that while that may partly be true, right? Like I think there was a large hiring boom post pandemic. Like there was a significant need. The economy boomed. You had the American Rescue Plan, and you had the stimulus checks. So there was a ton of money dumped into the economy during the pandemic, rightfully so, because it was we were facing a significant economic crisis. And while that may be a reality for a lot of these companies, I wouldn't necessarily say that the introduction of AI is not the case. I think for maybe a lot of these retail seasonal hires, that can be true, right? But two things can exist at the same time, right? Like I think really where AI is starting to cause a lot of concerns is with regards to the more white collar jobs or customer service jobs, where it's, that might be your typical summer internship where you can build some relevant professional skills and then go back to school in the fall. Those jobs, I think, we're primarily concerned are disappearing, because if a company can replace an intern that they pay $18 or $25 an hour with a robot, they will more than likely do it. And I think that's where our concern is. So I wouldn't necessarily say what you're hearing on Twitter isn't true, but I think all of these things aren't necessarily happening in a vacuum, right? Like two can be true at the same time.
What would you say to a young person who feels kind of despondent right now, that they just can't get a job, and they hear you when you say that AI and all these other things are creating problems for the workforce, but do you have any advice to them?
Yeah, I think at Young Invincibles, we really pride ourselves on training young people to be advocates for themselves, especially in the political process. So, if your concerns about the job market, are warranted, take those and deliver those to your leaders, because your leaders are making decisions about tomorrow, the future of the labor market, the future of the economy. I know AI is a significant concern among a lot of young workers, and currently Congress, I work at the federal level. There are several bills in Congress that are discussing the rights of young workers when it comes to AI, and to get involved and to start advocating for yourself, because people are making decisions on your behalf, and they aren't including your voice. And so making yourself heard in that process is really crucial.
Alex, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Katie, back over to you. I'm going to be on camera with you for this last one. I know this is a favorite segment of yours, but take us through the wacky world of the internet.
Yeah, so I'm sure most of you will be familiar with the term rage bait. And so we run a weekly segment called Rage Bait of the Week. And today we're going to be discussing a viral video where a father named Tyler Brodsky took his two daughters into an empty single-use woman's toilet at a gas station in Alabama. And someone knocked on the door, and it was another customer, and then he started yelling at him, telling him off for taking his daughters into the female restroom. And the man started saying he would call the police, and the video now has 28 million views on TikTok, and we'll show you the clip now.
There is a man with his two little girls using the women's bathroom.
Wash your hands, baby.
He's washing his hands with his daughters right now. He is leaving it.
Some of them are just immature.
And he's refusing. He's taking his sweet time.
I have two girls washing their hands.
You let this lady, this woman she's a woman. She can bring her daughters in here. She's a manager of the QT.
I'm their
You can
dad.
ask her. I understand. And you don't have any business bringing them into the women's bathroom.
They're girls. They go to the women's bathroom.
As soon as he leaves the women's bathroom, I will. I'm standing in the doorway. Hey, sweetheart. This is ridiculous, man.
I am so sorry.
It's okay. Some men are just immature.
Hi, Marissa. Thank you for coming and commenting on this video. How common is this situation where a parent is faced with having to take their like opposite gender child into a toilet and they don't know what to do?
I would say every second of every day. Before I was a professional, I'm a professional daughter, and me and my dad went on many of road trips where we either had to pull over, go into a gas station that did not have the proper restroom, or overall just seek additional resources. So it happens all the time.
Why do you think? Sorry, why do you think this went viral? Like, what about it made it just like fodder for the algorithm?
I think it struck two chords. One, the familiarity. You know, we can always choose what type of gender children we have. So you have girl dads and boy moms that are going to be with children that are not of the same gender as them, and they have to use the bathroom. So it's super common, and facilities, due to building regulations, enforce these gendered codes. So it happens so much.
Yeah, I also think it's just really of the moment. I think like right now, like it seems like this is a really hot topic in politics, and just sometimes these things, the most negative, the most toxic things just take off online.
Exactly. And also because of the outcry of support, I think that other people saw where other communities could be also vulnerable in these situations, because there is so many laws going up around gender regulations in bathrooms and increased scrutiny on various communities inside of these restrooms. I think that it brought a highlight to a under-highlighted area.
Can you explain like what your campaign do? And I'm also like secondary to this issue, interested if you deal with like the queue variations, because normally I know a female toilet queue is like 10 times as long.
Yes, so it actually has a name. It's called potty parity. And there are more laws coming out of the late 20th century that address that in building code. So obviously we have a men's and women's restroom, and often in many circumstances, but decades ago, they used to be built with the same number of stalls. We know that men and women traditionally use the bathroom in different ways and have different amounts of time. So I believe it was California that brought out the first potty parity laws in the 70s, and then various states have different ratios that they use, whether it's, I believe Texas is 2 women's bathroom to 1, and then they have it for different states.
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't looked into it. Thank you so much. Jack, we probably have to wrap up the show soon.
Yes, we do. How'd you feel with your first one?
Yeah,
other than the internet connection at the top of the show, minute 1 of you introducing yourself.
I know. Well, it's a good thing to convince me to install better Wi-Fi. So hopefully I've got a good argument now.
Thank you so much for joining us. This was the 4th episode of Newsreel Now. We will see you again next Thursday for another slate of stories and analysis. I'm your co-host, Jack Brewster, signing off for me and Kitty. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.